You're tuned in to Strength Culture's Quantum Lifting Podcast, brought to you by the team from Melbourne Strength Culture, the home of Australian strength training. Here are your hosts, Charlie Athanasiou and Jamie Smith.
Welcome to chapter 58 of the Melbourne Strength Culture presents Quantum Lifting Podcast. So this is our first one back for 2017, although the Jake
20.
Did you say 17?
I've lost it. 3 years ago. 2020.
Yeah.
Thanks for correcting me.
No worries.
I don't know malfunction.
Yeah.
Brain capacity there. We did do the Jacob episode before, which was 2019. But we're back. We're here with our lovely friend,
Peter Coleman.
Pete Coleman.
Hello.
Is it Doctor?
It is.
It is. Sorry, my mistake.
You don't have to though.
Doctor.
It's
No,
not
we'll use
required.
Doctor.
Yeah, sure.
Doc,
You do
Doc,
you. Yeah.
Crazy.
But this is going to be a bit of an interesting podcast, a little bit away from what we typically normally talk about. I'm actually quite excited for it because me and Pete have some quite deep discussions.
We
But
do.
Just a little bit of a background on yourself. Who are you? What do you do? Where are you from?
So I'm from, I live in Melbourne. I live in Carnegie with my husband, and I did my PhD at Monash University in philosophy, and let's not go too deeply. I also did sessional tutoring there on Eastern philosophy, so Buddhism, Taoism, all that stuff. And then, in a weird turn of events, I ended up working in the not-for-profit industry in the area of particularly fundraising, and I'm a consultant in that one. And I suppose, other than that, just became an authorised marriage celebrant, so that's exciting. But I suppose the stuff we talk about a lot.
I've got the hot tip that you're going to be marrying Didier.
I am. Yeah,
Crazy.
that is the hot tip, is that, you know...
When Didier pops the question.
When Didier, I'm lined up.
Before we go anywhere, if you follow us, please go on Victoria, which is his girlfriend's Instagram page, and she uploaded some Wild West photos of Didier
Amazing.
on his holiday, and they're fantastic.
Yeah.
So
They're the best thing I've seen.
we're going to print them and frame them at the gym.
They have to go up in the gym somewhere.
They do.
I sent him directly to you because
Yeah,
you're not on Instagram.
I'm
like,
not.
Pete has to see.
Pete has to see.
They are everything officially. Yeah.
How do they do that? You dress up and then
You dress up, put a
vintage
filter
photos.
on, have a nice background.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah.
Vintage photos.
Yeah. They're amazing.
Hopefully he has a Wild West wedding.
Yeah. Ah, that'd be awesome. Love that.
Westworld.
Yeah.
Westworld. So yeah, we've studied PhD in
Philosophy.
Philosophy.
And then we, you and I chat a lot about the mindset stuff, the philosophy stuff.
Who is that?
Who is that? Something's going on.
Pounding something outside the room. Jamie's just left us to go tell him off.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, we're good.
We're good.
Yeah, cool. Love that.
Continue.
You and I, we chat the deep and meaningful issues of the world.
We do. I don't know if many people know. I love talking about training. Yeah, it's great. It's all good and well, but I like to venture off into the wonderful world of consciousness, philosophy,
all that jazz.
Why we're here, what we're doing, what the point of all this is. It just intrigues me to be a bit more. Well, me and Jamie talk. Jamie, Bulls.
Yeah, the three of us definitely. We have an interest in it for sure.
A fair bit as well, but it's definitely a conversation that can't be had with. You got to be ready for those conversations.
Yeah.
So me and you found that common ground.
Yeah, we did
instantly.
Yeah, we really did. It was good, and and Jamie B's bought these daily Stoic.
Yes.
For everyone,
which you gave me.
Yes, I did.
I borrowed off you.
Yeah.
I borrowed it off you. I borrowed. So you gave
the Meditations of
Epictetus.
Yeah.
Which I find, or you can touch a bit more, but they're interesting because the duality of them as both Stoic philosophers. One was a Roman emperor, and the other one was a slave.
He was a former slave.
So it kind of works well with the whole idea of Stoicism because you've got one that's obviously wealthy, powerful, and then slave.
And then, and you just finished.
I haven't finished. I've probably got about an hour left of the Stoic Challenge.
Yeah.
Which is an audio book, which I would definitely recommend because we know that a lot of people do listen to the book recommendations that we have on the podcast. So if you are interested in that, I would definitely recommend listening to that. It's only a short one, it's about 5 hours long, and it talks about the whole how the Stoic ideas sort of originated, but then also how some people fall on that philosophy without having formal education or without being aware of it, and then they get it becomes identified to them. Actually, this is very similar to the way that I perceive and react to things in my life. But it's a really good book, so thank you for that recommendation.
Oh, no worries. Yeah. Well, I mean, I personally find it sort of lines up with a lot of the other teachings and stuff that I've found really helpful, and particularly, and I think it's really applicable a lot of the time to training, in fact, because I mean, the major thing around mindset, because I mean, the Stoics were all about, so there were, for anybody that doesn't know, there was an ancient Greek philosopher, Zeno of Citium, and he founded it. Then he had Epictetus, who was his student, and then it was also popularized by Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman emperor, and also Seneca, who was in Rome as well. And they basically, well, they talked about a lot of different things, but the whole idea was about achieving the good life, basically eudaimonia, so wellness, like sort of well-being was the key idea, and how to live well. And the idea, and particularly sort of correlates with a lot of the stuff people like, say, Sam Harris talks about and stuff, is going back to yourself and your own perceptions of things is the key driver. So it not being so much about, it's looking at what you can control and what's within your grasp to deal with versus externalizing, you know, your hardship and making it the fault of the world, as it were.
Because we did a podcast back in the early days on external locus and internal locus of control. And we would like to think, we were talking about this before, Jenny and I, but we are, well, hopefully very internally locus of control driven. That we do like to, something goes wrong with, let's say, a client or even ourselves or anything, we look and go, what can I do to fix this? What may have I done to cause this? And what can I do to fix it? Rather than looking at the external factors, because that would fall into that whole stoic.
Yeah, well, they've actually, I got some quotes ready. I did some prep for us.
Is this prep for
this? Is prep for this, actually. I did some homework. But, I mean, there's the classic Epictetus quote, which is, men are disturbed not by the things that happen, but by their opinion about those things. And equally, that ties into the perception bit, which is, this is from Seneca, just as the stomach, when it is impaired by disease, gathers bile, and changing all the food that it receives, turns every sort of sustenance into a source of pain. So in the case of the perverse mind, whatever you entrust to it becomes to it a burden and a source of disaster and wretchedness.
It doesn't matter what you put in.
It doesn't matter what you're putting in, because if your perception is
off... If the mind itself is quote-unquote diseased, you will get a disease outcome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is.
It doesn't matter what it is or how good your life is. And again, that's I suppose where a lot of people we live in a very privileged, developed society in Australia. We sort of won the lifestyle lottery, but depression and anxiety are rife. And it's exactly the point, I think, that there's that huge dissatisfaction because people believe, or are given the perception or taught to believe, that if you buy the house, get the...
What's the Jim Carrey quote? Everybody needs to be rich and famous to realise it's not the answer.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's literally it.
Yeah.
Jim Carrey also went out into the forest and had heavy doses of psilocybin to discover that. Which I'm all for, but...
Yeah.
I think he...
And so, I mean, it really is about, therefore, focusing. It's not only your perceptions and obviously how you perceive, because we often believe or assume that our perceptions are true, our thoughts are true, that what we're perceiving is reality. And then oftentimes what we do with that is therefore externalize. We enslave ourselves to the behavior and conditions of what is outside of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in the book that the Stoic Challenge, he spoke about that because you spoke about like what you can control and what you can't control, and the things that you can, the only thing that you have pure control over is your mind.
Yes.
And he, as like similar to the stomach idea, is that your body is not even in your control, because he spoke about some of the examples of people that get the autoimmune diseases, and they turn into like they literally can only control like their eyes, and they communicate with like looking left or looking right.
Their
like
mind is fully aware,
their mind is fully
conscious.
I don't know the word. I can't remember the exact. But at any point, any of that could be taken, and you literally just have your mind. So,
but even cell regeneration, because every 7 years, every cell in your body has changed.
Yes.
So your physical being is not the same as what it was 7 years ago.
Yeah. So you're not the physical.
Are you?
You're not anything.
What are you?
Yeah.
It's very interesting. It gets very almost like I find it empowering because in a way, but it can also get very overwhelming where you're like, oh, well, shit, what can I control? What can I do? What can I change? And all that sort of stuff. It can get a little bit like, whoa, where am I?
Well, it's good. Like, as I was saying, I was mentioning before, as a teacher who I've found really, really helpful. She wouldn't call herself a teacher, but really helpful is this woman, Byron Katie.
Where would we be able to find her?
Well, she's in America. You can definitely listen. She's got a podcast.
Yep.
She's written a few books. One, the most famous is Loving What Is.
Yep.
She's written others, A Mind at Home with Itself.
The one
I'm actually in.
you're in it.
That one.
you
So
sign it?
I can. You won't know it's me because I'm under a fake name.
Yes.
Though if you know me and you read it, you can
You'll
tell
work
it's.
it out,
You definitely tell it's me. But she was this is a number of decades ago, but she was very, very severely depressed, unhappy, living in a halfway house, and she had this really profound transformative experience there, and it completely changed the way she saw everything. And since then, she's gone on to she teaches a thing called the work, which is a way of questioning stressful beliefs. So it's a series of questions you ask to challenge a belief you have about the world or other people particularly, and then it has a way of turning around what you're thinking. But what I was relevant to what you were saying is she talks about three kinds of business, which is my business, your business, and then what she calls God's business, but she means like the universe, everything, the weather or whatever. And she says, the sort of the life mission is to stay in my own business, stick in my own lane, because so much of our time, and it factors into the complaining thing as well, we make ourselves unhappy because we're so focused on what other people are doing or how other people aren't doing X, Y, and Z. And then coming back to yourself, and then, the teaching, I'm not sure the exact quote, but it's something like, we change the world through our example, not our opinion. So it's actually how we show up versus what we think about things, but our example is much more powerful,
without a doubt,
than anything we're saying.
It is very similar to sort of Jordan Peterson's ideas. He just pushes them a little bit differently, more from a psychologist standpoint.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is like, don't expect to change the world if you can't even like make your own bed.
Yeah, exactly.
Like lead by example first, which is very similar. Which is something I've tried to implement quite a bit.
I think definitely, leading by, but it's just actions speak louder than words at the end of the day. Like, the way that what you can portray, or not portray, probably not the right word, but the way in which you hold yourself into your own values and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's also the other thing, because it's also the question I like to ask whenever I see, we all with the media and so forth get this constant deluge of negative crap coming at us all the time. And, you see injustice, you see unkindness, you see all that. And what I've sort of learned to do over the years is then go, well, where am I unjust? Where am I unkind? Because I can't change. I can't really change what's happening in Syria, for example, but I can actually work on how I'm showing up in the world on a day-to-day basis.
For sure.
And if I want people to be more generous, for example, I need to be generous.
Yeah.
That's the example.
Definitely.
So it definitely sort of really helps to sort of change the mind. And then, of course, the really other interesting thing I found really helpful with the Stoic is the issue of perspective, because I think another major thing, and I think that can really play into training, is a significant, and every part of life, whether it's your job or your relationship, is a massive lack of perspective. So not really seeing things as they are. The quote I love, which I just think really sums it up, is imagine the vast, this is by Seneca again, imagine the vast abyss of time and think of the entire universe. Then compare what we call a human lifetime to that immensity. You will see how tiny a thing is that we wish for and seek to prolong. So it's kind of like, and they talk also about how like looking for fame after death, for example, like people trying to become famous and be well known. He who gets excited about fame after death doesn't consider that anyone who remembers him will also die very soon. Then again, the one who succeeds that one until all recollection has been extinguished. Yeah. So it's kind of like the perspective, because when, you know, you might get really disappointed because you haven't hit your, you know, whatever lifts, or you didn't get the job even, or you haven't done X, Y, and Z. Like, considering it in that larger perspective of, is this actually important?
Yeah. I think it's something, because I definitely fall into that. I have a very competitive mindset.
Yeah.
And it's something that has started to shift a little bit, where I realise that aiming to be, in terms of the business, probably would be the easiest place to see it. Like, I want this place to be considered, in the conversation, I've said it from the start, in the conversation, the best strength and conditioning gyms in Australia. That's the end goal for strength culture for me.
Yeah.
And I often get caught in the thing where I'm competing against other gyms or other people. And in the last, I'd probably say the last 12 months, where we've really focused on the in-house service and what we're doing in-house and the other coaches and getting them involved more, and myself delegating more, I've started to realize that all that other stuff, if it happens, it's going to happen or whatever. But what really matters is what's happening here, enjoying this, the impact that we have on the people at Strength Culture and all that sort of stuff, and not getting caught up in this competitive, externalized projection of something that I want to create. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I'm having the influence that I wanted to have when we set up this gym, and we're helping people, and we've got a very loyal group of people who are immensely connected to what we're doing and part of the ride with us.
Yeah.
Why are we trying to chase this thing and speed up this process? Like, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen, but it doesn't mean anything if it doesn't happen. So I don't know, it's just been a bit of a shift in that sense from that similar.
For me, it was very similar with my own training, is that I came to this realization that the numbers didn't mean anything. It was what my training represented. And the training is just a very logical, like, the reason I do enjoy powerlifting, yes, it gets monotonous and all that. It's not so much for the powerlifting, it's what it represents. And my coach says this, it allows you to explore parts of yourself that I wouldn't normally get to explore. Yeah. So when I feel down and out, still coming in and doing the work and getting it done. But I started to realize that the end number doesn't bring, great, I hit that deadlift that way. It didn't bring any more satisfaction or fulfillment.
You just see the next goal.
Yeah. So I was like, and then I started thinking, I was like, well, am I ever actually going to be fulfilled and happy? And it was letting go of that expectation when I actually started to see more fulfillment and happiness within my training and within my own personal just life. And it was very much the idea of the Brock Bastion, the other side of happiness, that happiness is on a spectrum with discomfort, pleasure, pain, and you need to experience both as deeply. Yes. To actually, so you need to experience the full spectrum to.
And the more you suffer, the relative more gain of happiness you can create.
But also understand that happiness is not an end state; it's a vacation. It comes and goes. It's just like a vacation.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's where like the Stoics talk about the word eudaimonia. I sort of prefer, because it's like this flourish. It doesn't really mean happiness. It means sort of flourishing or well-being, and it's kind of like the idea that you focus on a sort of a deeper level of well-being, and then the emotions come and go, but then that sort of deeper well-being that you cultivate doesn't go away, because they talk about, because they're more and more talking about there's ACT therapy, which is acceptance and commitment therapy, and they talk about mindfulness, which is the acceptance part, but the commitment part is like identifying your values and living in accordance with your values, because you can't guarantee that you're always going to be happy, in a sort of happy state, but you can sort of work towards consistently living in accordance with your values. And then it's, rather than the idea of this sort of happiness, which has a very sort of very narrow focus, it's rather about sort of living a life that you're proud of, that you sort of believe in as a more meaningful destination. Yeah. Or actually journey rather than destination. Because I mean, that book that you mentioned, The Other Side of Happiness, by Melbourne psychologist Brock Bastian. And he there talks about how, will you describe it? You've read it recently.
Just the pleasure and pain coexist, and they need to coexist. And it's actually our ability to experience pain and uncomfortable situations that build psychological resilience to us to adapt. So same as a physical, the more you run or lift weights, and there's a stress on the body then becomes stronger. It's the same with the mind. So we actually need to experience psychological discomfort and pain, which ultimately will lead us to then experience more happiness and more joyful moments. But we have to accept that we're going to experience both, and not to be chasing this endless goal of happiness, because it's not achievable.
With the Daily Stoic, with the book recommendation, he spoke about that, and that some people fall into the trap of thinking that mindset is an innate quality that somebody has just been gifted, like somebody's X tall or X strong, but and he uses the concept of your grandparents potentially moving through like World War I or World War II, and the qualities that would have had to be developed and built throughout that process, and how much resilience they would have had to build. Whereas now it's like, this supermarket has run out of my favorite yogurt, and that's a thing that ruins your day and all this sort of stuff. And the contrast between what our grandparents potentially experienced through like a war-torn moment of history compared to what now disrupts our homeostasis, quote unquote, shows that it's not an innate thing, because the people that went through, their grandparents went through the war process, would have passed those qualities on through their families, whereas my grandparents went through war, and that has been passed on to me, where I'm this resilient, like steel-faced person. It's something that has been built, and it's an active quality that I need to work on and actually change the way that I'm perceiving. So if you are in a position where you're feeling that I'm just not as good as this as anybody else, like, it is a quality, as you said, that you can put yourself in those positions and try and identify when you're being challenged to be better at.
This is that also why I like doing this sort of cold immersion, cold water, ice immersion, like even with the
invigorations,
the fast the other day. Because it's a form of psychological resilience. It's also challenging your beliefs and your belief systems, because otherwise you do just end up in that comfort. Everything's just comfortable, and there's no real growth from sitting in comfort. And the easiest way for people to understand, most of our listeners probably do train. I hope they do some strength training, but you put your body under stress. And he actually used this analogy in the book, training. He's like, at the time it can be quite, pleasure and pain actually coexist very closely, and they're on a fine line where training can be quite painful. You go to the gym, it can hurt. You go for a long run, it can be painful. It can be, but then ultimately after, you feel a sense of accomplishment. Potentially get runner's high or training high, and you feel really good for the rest of the day. So painful and pleasure, they're pretty close sometimes, which I thought was very, very interesting.
Well, it's
and just cold water immersion, another example. He said, he goes, you don't want to get in it, and then afterwards you feel $1 million. You feel like this adrenaline rush, you feel awesome. So
no. Well, I was just actually going to say off the back of that, it's something else Brock talks about, and I think an article I saw or some discussion of his, but it's study that showed that and this is very rudimentary, but they did a study of, I think, Chinese people versus Western, whether it was American or Australian or wherever, And basically the idea, what they found was that people in the sort of Eastern context had the same level of sort of anxiety, depression, so forth, the same sort of indications of it that we would have, but it didn't become pathological the way it would. It wouldn't become a sickness in the way it often does in the Western world. And the reason for that was, rather than the experience itself, it was the way they saw it. So they would, for instance, be able to see it as more of a yin-yang principle, like that you don't expect to feel just one emotion at a time.
You need both.
And that they can coexist.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we tend to do in the Western thinking is we tend to believe that if we're happy now, we'll be happy forever.
Yeah.
And if we're sad now, we'll be sad
That's
forever.
it, yeah.
Whereas they see it as, well, today I'm happy, but tomorrow I might be sad, and whatever.
Accepting.
It's going with the...
But that's also the practice of meditation, which this year I've been very consistent with. Since January 1st, I did 10 days straight, and I've only missed 3 days since the year started. But accepting that those feelings still come up, but your attachment to them, I find there's a big separation between how attached I get to those feelings. So they'll pop up, but you're able to let them just sort of do their thing and pass.
Exactly.
Whereas I find when I'm not practicing my meditation, it just they can get more overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because I have personally gone to a big place of realization that those feelings are always going to happen.
Yeah.
Sadness is going to happen, but it's also that duality of life that makes things. Like this podcast I listened to the other day with Paul Check, if it wasn't for the choice to love would mean nothing.
Yes.
So the fact that we have the choice to love something or love someone or express love makes it all the more beautiful.
Yeah.
Because if it wasn't a choice, it would mean nothing.
Yeah.
Similar to why life would mean nothing if we didn't die.
Yeah.
Like death is what gives life its beauty.
Well, that was the quote, actually, I think, after I started, because I knew you. I found it's by Nietzsche, who wasn't a Stoic. But he said he talked about amor fati, which is love of fate, love of your fate, basically. And he goes, my formula for greatness in man, gendered language, is amor fati. The fact that a man wishes nothing to be different, either in front of him or behind him, or for all eternity. Not only must the necessary be born and on no account concealed, but it must also be loved. And I mean, that's something, Byron Katie talks a lot about, is sort of loving what is, like that sort of courage to sort of invite or welcome in whatever comes your way, as, as something that you can ultimately see you can draw benefit from.
Exactly.
You said it to me before when
everything happens for you, not to you.
Because I said to you on the floor before that one of my sort of things coming into 2020 or 2017 is that I wanted to practice more patience, frustration and anger, because I was finding that towards the back end of the year I was getting quite frustrated and angry a lot. And so that along with my meditation practice, when people are coming up to me in a situation that actually makes me frustrated or angry, I've flipped my perspective on it, and that they're actually bringing me a gift to practice what I've asked for. So it's not like you're making me angry. Like you're actually giving me a gift to practice.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you would say that the beginning of running a small business is insanely challenging, or can be, particularly as it grows.
Without a doubt.
But you would have gone through a accelerated learning process by doing that.
Yeah.
And you'd be so grateful now in retrospect for all the things you learned, not just about running a business, but about yourself and resilience.
Yeah, the hard moments. I've made a post about this when we put up the photo of the Congress with the 100 people that attended and came, and we had to go to a bigger venue, and it was just an awesome day. But some random person liked the photo this week, and I went back and read the caption, and the caption was all about, at the start of the year we experienced that time where there was a big exodus of people from our service for no reason. We lost about 10% of the amount of people we had at that time, and it was enough to deflect everything we were doing to a point where it's like, we need to change the way that we're communicating with clients, the way that we are on the gym floor, the service itself. It made us bring in new service options and all this sort of stuff. And ultimately, that huge hit that we took was the best thing for us because it forced growth in that sense. And I'll be forever thankful of the probably month-long highest peak of anxiety I've had.
Yeah.
Because it's now allowed me to get to this point where I could take 6 weeks off on a holiday. I could give more responsibility to the staff members, and ultimately I'm in a far better position now as a small business owner.
Yeah.
Because we went through the part where I thought, is it worth another squeeze of this orange to try and get this thing to a point where it gets its own feet and does its own thing? Because that were the thoughts at the time. It took a huge down phase to get the up phase, and then there's the yin yang. You can't appreciate the up without having gone through a down. The deeper the down, the more relative up we can move. So it is a gift in its end.
And the sort of the interesting thing I sort of particularly find as I get older is I think you also, a lot of us have the belief that we've sort of reached a point in our lives where you sort of hit this magical plateau where, I don't know, you bought the house and you've got the partner and you've got the children and it's all kind of, the business is perfect and blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't actually happen, and you wouldn't want it to really, because you don't get that ongoing, because it's a growth and you'll revisit the same problems again.
Yeah, but it'll be in a different package. It will
Life is like a spiral.
Yeah, it is.
You keep coming back to the same things and seeing them on a deeper level.
Yeah.
And learning even further. So it's not life.
We went deep.
It's not linear.
Yeah, it's not. And it's also like, because then there's that frustration also that can come up when you've been working on yourself, for example, and then something happens and you feel right back where you were.
And it hits you again.
But you actually don't realize that in that way it is like a spiral, that you actually look at it, you will look at it in a different way, and that there's actually greater depth potentially as you are revisiting the same issue again and again, and then you might learn something further. Like, it's not a thing where, and I think this is a bigger problem with the way we see things in society. It's like we're all building towards this sort of ultimately unattainable goal of this final success that we all want. And we think it should be this straightforward progression from one to another, which is sort of like training's a great example. Yeah. Where you'll have, really good days, bad days.
Everything in between. But it's all part of the process.
Exactly.
You gotta embrace it.
It was like when I came in tired that day and threw my back out.
Yeah.
I won't be doing that again. I'll be scaling back on the...
You learned.
Yeah, you learn through the process. So it's just and then it's sort of applicable to everything. But I think that's in a weird way what I love about powerlifting is, well, a few different things, but one of them is that you may end up doing things you just never thought you could do, like with your body. Physically, like you end up physically doing things you can't do. And again, it's such a major mental game. Like it teaches you so much about perspective and expectations and, comparing, that whole thing, Stoics talk a lot about the suffering we have when we compare ourselves with others and so forth. And I mean, that's something that can so easily kick in. You see what other people are lifting and you're nowhere near that, or you're in your own...
Yeah, you see it all the time.
...progression. And I remember when I started, I asked you something actually, Charlie, about how... was it good for someone of my fitness? Or something like that. And it's like, well, it's good for you. Like, it's not matter. Relevant. Yeah. It's an arbitrary goal,
Yeah, I think you wanted to bench 100.
Or something, and is that a good... I do, but I still do. But I mean... I will. But if I live long enough, never know. Yeah, I will. We'll be good.
No, well, we actually had this discussion today. We were like, we might die this afternoon.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we were both like, why do people think that's morbid? Because it's the reality.
Yeah.
It's like you can either confront it and face it, and the further you look into that, the more grateful you are to be here alive in this present moment.
Exactly.
Because it's an actual reality.
Well, because that's
you could die at any point.
It's a Stoic phrase, memento mori, remember you will die, is basically what that means. And it's basically...
Remember you will die.
Remember you will die. Remember
Literally,
memento you... It basically translates as remember death.
Yeah.
So remember you will die. And it's basically, it was a thing, and they used to have it a lot. Certain paintings, you'd have a landscape with or flowers and fruit, and then you'd have a skull sat there in the picture, or people would keep skulls in their home. It was a reminder of death, so that you appreciate life.
Yeah.
And so that's because we do live like we're never going to die. And, you know, it's interesting as you do get, you know, I'm turning 40 next year, so I'm not near death. But at the same time, you think, well, I probably only have double that again.
Yeah.
I've only probably got another 40 years after that, realistically. And if that, and, you know, all the things I've worried about in my lead up to this point in my life, or the things that have caused me so much distress or whatever over the years, I think, what a waste of my time.
They're all
like,
gone.
you know,
It's
like,
that old,
and the things you worry about never happen. Usually it's the stuff you don't worry about that will happen to you. But
And I think touching on that point, something really interesting that I learned from listening to the Happiness Lab by Dr. Laurie Santos was we have an impact bias, that we believe good experiences, let's say buying a new car, getting a puppy, getting married, are going to bring us more happiness than what they actually do. And then also negative experiences, a bad breakup, a death, are going to actually bring us more discomfort or pain than what they actually do, and that we actually have the ability to bounce back quicker than we do. So our perception of those things is vastly skewed.
yes,
Where, as you said, most of the things you used to worry, and I can look back now, like some of the things I used to worry about, I got through them.
Yeah.
And I came back stronger, and now I don't worry about those things. But at the time, I was like, that was like so overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, how am I going to survive this? But you just do.
Yeah.
And so that impact bias, I thought, is quite interesting, because that had a big shift in my perspective. Because I was always like, oh, you finish school, they tell you at school you'll go to uni, and then you'll get a real job, and then you'll get I couldn't wait for my driver's license, I couldn't wait to be 18 to drink and go out with my friends, I couldn't wait to travel to Europe. And obviously now with the gym, we're running literally in an amazing job that we've set up for ourselves. And I was like, I got to this point, and this was literally this year, where I was like, it didn't change. I still feel, I don't feel any more fulfilled or inspired. I'm like, what? I felt like I was lied to by everyone.
Yeah.
Like everyone had been lying to me. And not that anyone was doing it intentionally, but I was like, there is
no goal.
Society, happiness. They throw it down your throat. It doesn't. It's not there. There are happy moments, don't get me wrong, but this goal of like, when you do this and that, you'll achieve this state of euphoria that will just last forever. And I just felt, I felt like I was lied to. And then the moment that like glass shattered, it's like you just see it differently. Everything is, and I just realised that just be present.
Yeah.
As best you can, yeah.
And I think, again, training is a great example of that, because people will train for a competition. And then I haven't done a competition, but people often experience a real sort of a bit of a down after it's all
I
done.
do, except this one I experienced a high.
Oh, interesting.
And I rode that high into my first training block, but I think that's because I experienced a real down in the comp block.
Right.
So I was really fatigued, like absolutely smashed. And then so I battled it then, got through the comp, did really well. And then I was looking forward to my deload, and I was then excited to train again. And it's just like, I didn't get that post-comp blues, but I have had it before, because you're so focused on this one thing, and it sort of gives you a purpose, and then it's done and it's gone.
Yeah.
But I think that also just comes with, now I've been doing this for 3 years, so like more maturity and more
and we talk about this a lot. Your perception is probably skewed slightly more objective because you're a coach. And you see all of the emotional responses from lifters, because generally the people who aren't coaches have the more peaks and troughs of ups and downs, because they're not viewing it from an objective standpoint that it doesn't matter. Like, again, that old scale is just it's going up. It doesn't matter that today is down. So I would assume that you as a coach, and definitely a more informed you've definitely thought about a lot of this in detail. Would mitigate some of those peaks and troughs a little bit from a psychological, maybe not the physical, definitely not the physical, but the psychological ups and downs that do come with.
But it's also, I look at the lifters that I admire, like Bryce Lewis, my coach,
they're extremely.
Mike T, Brett Gibbs. Even JP used to tell me a lot of this stuff when I first started powerlifting, the peaks and but even he's going through a bit of a rough patch with his training now. So it happens to everyone. I'm sure I'll go through a rough patch with my training where I don't want to train. But I look at all those guys and I just they seem to be the only one I know. Well, I know Bryce personally through FaceTime, but Brett Gibbs we've met a few times, and they seem to all be very sort of stoic in their training approach. And just being able to ride the ebbs and flows, ride the wave, ride the ebbs and flows. The waves are going to happen. You may as well just relax. It's like you're in the rip. Don't fight the rip. Just ride it.
And it's also, I think the thing with Stoicism that's sort of often misunderstood, the word Stoic kind of has the connotation that it's very sort of cold and emotionless. It isn't actually about that. It's about just the way you see the emotions, the way you sort of understand it. It's not about not having the ups and downs or not, experiencing those emotions because they're part of life.
Or brushing them off.
Or just brushing or repressing them.
Yeah.
But it's just allowing that experience to happen and just having the larger context that today I lose, tomorrow I win, that's life. You're not as attached to that ebb and flow. And then there's that sort of more baseline well-being that you cultivate where you understand that that's just the way life goes.
Yeah, you're better at managing all of those changes to your being. Really, The first 30 minutes of the book, the Stoic Challenge, he unpacks that exactly, which I thought, because I had always thought about it as just deflect things, just beat it off, it doesn't beat it off, wrong word, but bat it off. Just deflect things, suppress emotion, it doesn't matter. Oh, great, I got a pay rise, awesome, continue. That's a good thing. That should be awesome, well done, you've done well. But it's the way you're viewing all of those happenings, whether they're ups or downs. Is more of the Stoic mind, not the, as you said, suppressive of emotion.
And being really cold and because the other thing, because Jamie, you mentioned, and it was funny because we were both doing it weirdly at the same time. I've been practicing recently, or when the new year kicked off, not complaining. And you were saying that's something you've been doing as well, or trying to.
I found that a lot of the I don't know if this is just something that I've been doing with personal training, but I start a lot of conversations just by arbitrary complaining about something, and then that's the trigger to start a conversation. You'd be I had a really shit sleep last night, and then talk about what was occurring before I went to sleep or something like that. I watched Don't Fuck with Cats. But I start the conversation with, I got really poor sleep last night because I was watching just get rid of the complaint at the start of the conversation.
There's actually something that I used to speak with. Simon used to tell me this. About, because I used to always be I'm tired, I need sleep, I need this, my training, I need. And so that's something I've also challenged now. And she used to always say to me, just channel the energy. You just channel, you don't need, bring in that energy. You don't need, if you've had a poor night's sleep, just bring in the energy that you need. And I didn't quite get it. I've started to understand it more because I've had poor night sleeps and I've still come in and performed and outperformed what I thought I would do. Whereas my limiting mindset used to be I've had poor night sleep, I'm not going to perform today, before I'd even come in and done it. But I've started to understand it more now. I don't know how to explain it. I think it's just an understanding that I've.
Well, again, it reminds me a bit of Byron Katie's saying again, where she talks about grief, and she talks about the experience of grief, and you said, "Is it grief, or are you sure it's not love?" And so she basically, it's when you're grieving, is that, it's a way of rethinking about it where, is that love? Is that actually that emotion you're feeling? Is it really love that you're feeling? Because you're associating, you believe it's a negative experience of what we call grief, but maybe it's something different. Is it, because we can think about, they're so closely related, things is it, am I anxious or am I excited? Am I sad or am I just feeling, we don't have to, we're so quick.
It's not cut and clear. It's not don't put it in a box.
It's the same as winning. To win, you have to also potentially may have the experience of losing. And for example, with powerlifting, you're going to go out on the platform, you're either going to make the lift or not. But to have the high of making a big PR, you also potentially have to experience the down of failing a lift, which everyone will do. And I just lost that fear of failing. I was fuck it.
Doesn't matter.
Going
Doesn't
out-
mean anything anyway.
Going out there anyway, like who cares? Like, and ultimately, it's like once you stop focusing on the fear of failing, you don't manifest that. And
How's
it's
your
hard to explain that to people. I don't know how to.
how's your non-complaining going?
It's actually been going really well. I haven't actually complained since I started. I've realised I've been quite mindful of it. It's interesting though. I'm currently, as you guys both know, I'm consulting and I'm doing some work with La Trobe Uni at the moment, and it means I'm commuting and I don't drive. I mean, it wouldn't be that much better if I did, but it's taking me 2 hours to get there and 2 hours to get home every day. And it was something in the initial stages I found myself complaining about, going on blah blah blah. And then you actually asked me the other day, how's the commute? I said it's actually a really good opportunity. I meditate on the commute, I listen to audiobooks, I might just listen to music, and it's actually a really nice time. So it's literally about the way you reframe it, but you do notice the sort of the impulse to complain in certain situations or go, I don't want to do this.
One of my best mates, Steve, who he'll probably be listening to this because he listens to it a lot, but got a new job quite far away, and everyone's saying, you're going to drive like 90 minutes. He's like, it's mad. I pump through audiobooks, I pump through podcasts. Well, he literally messaged me the other day for a list of books. He's like, give me a list. He must be churning through them, like, because he's every day you're commuting. But yeah, he's like, it's a good time to be on my own and learn and like listen to. So like, yeah, it's really how you view things, because like, what else would you be doing? You get home earlier, it's like, yeah, great.
Whatever, I'm probably going to sit and watch Netflix.
Yeah,
it's not
exactly.
that different. I can actually do something. And what I've done is my good friend Jo, who I'm working with now, she's sort of halfway there. And we actually meet up and she drives the other half. And we actually have a really fun time in the morning, and I buy coffees and it's fun. So it sort of reminds me a lot like the Taoist philosophy, which is ancient Chinese philosophy, the Tao Te Ching is sort of the main text there. And it's these sort of short poems or prose about life, basically. And in it, amongst other things, there's the analogy where it talks about water as the strongest element, because water is the one that will wear away the stone, but it moves and adapts and it changes too, and it's like the whole idea is be like the water, not like the rock.
Bruce Lee.
Yeah, exactly.
Be
So
the water.
because when you're brittle, they talk about trees, like the willow tree can withstand the wind because it's flexible, it goes with it, whereas the brittle tree will just fall over. And so the ability to move and adapt with what your situation is and respond to what is, versus sort of, because that's really what complaining is fighting against what is. It's resistance to what is happening.
It's non-acceptance.
It's non-acceptance, which is just causes us more suffering.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. At the end of the day.
So it's been something I've been really trying to work on, and I have been. This week's been a lot better.
But again, you don't. I think that's the whole thing with all of these practices. You're never going to get it perfect, and you're always going to screw it up.
And then I'm like, fuck.
Is perfect actually something?
Yeah. Well,
because what we perceive as perfect, like let's say that we can go to the gym.
Yes.
And talk about bodybuilding. What someone perceives as a perfect physique is just a perception.
Yeah.
What makes it any less perfect or imperfect compared to another physique?
Yeah.
It's our social conditioning and belief systems as a whole that we go, that's the perfect physique.
Yeah.
It's just the
you
body.
speak to that person and they're probably
they don't think
they're probably so
physique.
down on themselves.
Yeah.
Everyone else will look at you and be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Well,
So, what is perfect?
The whole ripped abs thing is only a pretty recent, culturally thing
It's the
that
same,
people
the-
have
The perception of what a sexy woman looks like has changed over the years. I remember I saw something that was like from, Marilyn Monroe and stuff had the bigger hips and all that.
Yeah.
That was what was perceived as sexy back
And
then,
it went
and
to
now
stick
it's
thin, and now
now
it's
it's-
back to
like it's just
just
you've got no hope.
yeah.
it's just perception.
Yeah.
Because what we think of our bodies really has nothing to do with our bodies. Because this is actually another Byron Katie thing. She actually says your body doesn't care what you think of it. It's just doing its job.
Yeah.
It's your mind that has the problem.
attaches.
Your body's just your body. It doesn't have an opinion. It's what your mind is thinking about your body creates problems. And then she talks about how sort of ungrateful we can be for our bodies because they carry us around. We can't live our lives without them. They just uncomplainingly support us in our lives, and we're so critical of them.
Yeah.
You know,
Avatar.
yeah, so it's interesting, but the not complaining really highlights to me also, you know, how much you do complain in your mind, and then finding myself not complaining, things have actually felt easier. Like, yeah, I find the complaining just makes things feel more difficult because, you know, when at work, for instance, there's a project or whatever, I have to write something I don't really want to do, versus complaining, and I could just.
It makes the mountain bigger.
Yeah.
It makes it.
It's the water.
Yeah,
Be the
it's
water.
just.
That's one of Ben Pekulski's when he's 34. I don't know why I was 34.
Life habits. I
Yeah.
think I can't. He did
Surrounded
have a reason why it
arbitrary.
was. But, yeah.
Success or life habits, and one of them was never ever complain.
Yeah.
Ben Pekulski, interesting guy, bodybuilder, IFBB pro, like massive jack guy, but very down this rabbit hole. But it's cool because he's bringing that awareness to a lot of people in typically an industry where it probably wasn't that prominent before. But I've noticed that there's been a lot more people that are deep into their training and lift weights and bodybuild and do that are opening up to this stuff more. That's cool to talk. So yeah. So Ben Pekulski, cool guy. I like it.
The other one to shout out is because Jamie B and I were talking about is the 4 agreements.
Yeah, Charlie read them the other day too.
Yeah,
Yes.
and they are. I do know them. They're always do your best. Not in the right order, but it's. I think be impeccable with your word, which is basically like. Again, not complaining and also being mindful of what you say and the impact what you say.
Not gossiping.
Yeah, things like that.
The idea of that is that with how technology works now, we just shoot text, bang, 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 we've lost that touch with our words. So 100 years ago, you had to write a letter.
Yes.
And this is going to be your only contact with this person for a month, let's say.
Yeah.
You would make sure every word on that paper was exactly what you wanted to say in the way you wanted to say it because you're not going to speak to them again for a month, let's say. But with text now, you just, whatever, like, because back and
Actually,
forth.
change that.
Yeah, like it's so we've lost that touch with
our words.
Yes.
And our words are so powerful,
Yeah.
right? Like, and then it's don't make assumptions because again, we often, I mean, how often do we all do this? We assume that someone thinks something and they don't. I mean, again, it was like I was talking about before I came here. I was, unless obviously, I'm gay. No shit, everyone. Anyway, before I came to a powerlifting gym...
You did say your husband.
Yeah, I did say my husband before. But, before I came to a powerlifting gym, I had sort of prejudices and assumptions. And I was a bit like, I wonder what it'll be like. And everyone couldn't have been nicer, lovely, and more welcoming. It's such a lovely environment, and then you realize you just make these assumptions and you project onto people.
We actually did this. Me and Buzzman did our invigorations on Tuesday, and we were like, we were talking about stereotypes and stuff.
Yeah.
We're like, have you ever wondered what people think of us? Like me, Buzz, and Jason walking together. I'm like, do you reckon they just think we're just dumb meat eaters? I'm like 100%, but like that's not what we are. Like we don't weight's fun. I do that like that, but it's not like it doesn't define me. It's not what I am.
No.
And if you actually come here and listen to us talk, I feel like we're somewhat intelligent.
Yes.
To some degree.
And we've got some really, really smart people training here as well. Yeah.
That's what I mean. So it was interesting to think about it from the other perspective. I was like, do you ever wonder what people think of us?
Yeah.
When they see like us walking down the street.
And also making assumptions really blocks you from other people. It blocks you from
without a doubt,
connection because
100%.
you're just projecting your assumptions.
Without a doubt.
Then don't take anything personally. And that's a really powerful one because it's like what someone thinks of you, he describes it, is their own dream of you, and the idea, like people are always going to project their ideas onto you of who you are and what they think of you. So whatever someone says about you, it's their thinking, right? Now, that can be, and again, Byron Katie, she talks about it as the gift of criticism. So if someone were to criticize you, rather than becoming defensive, you take it as information and their insight to you, and you go, well, is that true for me? Like, you can road test it. It's like someone could say, you were dishonest then. And you look back and go, well, no, I don't actually think I was dishonest, but thank you for that. That's interesting. And then you can go from there and go, but I can see where I've been dishonest at other times.
Try your best not to be dishonest in the future.
And, don't take anything personally. And equally, when someone gives you a compliment, you can also go, well, is that true? Is that true for me? And, it's a way of, rather than taking things personally, it's a way of you waking up to yourself and sort of having that greater insight.
Yeah.
And then the other one is always do your best. So basically the idea is that if you're always doing your best, regardless, and your best will change from day to day, depending if your best when you're sick isn't going to be your best when you're well. But if you're always doing your best, then you won't live with regret. You'll know that you did your best in a situation. It may not have worked out the way you wanted, but you did your best. So
I think, and that was one I was sort of with training is like, or anything, coming in with the open mindset. I'm going to do my absolute best today, and not limiting yourself because you've had poor sleep or poor food, or like be open to the idea.
Yeah.
That Sean Noriega actually said that when he was sick, he hit a massive PR, I think on bench or squats, and this is a guy from the US, quite high power lifter, pretty well known, and he goes, he was sick and he came and hit a massive PR. He goes, I didn't think anything else. I was sick, just come in, do my best, and it was a PR. He's like, most people would limit themselves because they're sick. Yeah. Obviously, there is a time to not train when you are sick. If you're fevering on the couch, maybe stay there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that whole be open to doing your best.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you're limiting what you potentially may be capable of.
Yeah.
Where did the 4 agreements come from? Is that a?
It's a Mexican Toltec.
Toltec, yeah.
Toltec.
Bruce has a book, Toltec, Life and Death.
But he's this guy Manuel Ruiz, I think is his name, and I think he's from a lineage of teachers or elders in this particular indigenous community, and he just sort of summarized. He's done a 5th agreement. Which is about, I haven't read it, but I think it's about not necessarily believing or not believing things. It's basically about that real openness of not settling into definitively knowing something, because then it can always change.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's done that. But I think the 4 agreements, they seem so simple, but the application.
Well, when Charlie read them, because they were it was like a 1 sentence thing for each of them, and each one really made you think about its application is literally endless of where you want to apply it and how you apply it or whatever. And it was because I had never heard it until this week. Yeah. And I was like, that's actually
because I wanted to get it canvassed, on a canvas, and put on in my living room or something.
Yeah.
It's there daily.
Yeah.
Daily reminder.
Yeah. So
I want to finish up because we're hitting the hour mark, and usually. The quote on your arm, because it's in Greek.
Oh yes, ancient Greek. This is actually Epictetus. And this is one I just always carry with me, which is do not wish things to be as you would want. Rather, wish them to be as they are, and all will be well with you.
It's very Stoic.
It is. Yeah. Well, it's Epictetus, the Stoic.
Mr. Stoicism.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, we'll
normally wrap it up with where can people find you, but you're not on any socials.
No, I'm not. So they can find me here. Yeah, absolutely. Find me at the gym.
Or in Carnegie.
Yeah, or in Carnegie.
Or on a train
hanging around. Or on a train to Bandura. A tram and a train, probably, to Bandura. Yeah.
That was a very, very interesting conversation. You actually, I'll say that one offline.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. I'll tell you what it is when we get off shut the mics down.
All good.
And I was going to put this at the start, but I'll put it at the end. The mentorship is open for information on the website. So if you've got it to the end here, go and read up. And if you have any questions, speak to me personally, either by email, phone, or any of the socials. But other than that, I think we're done. Any final words?
No, thanks so much for having me, and thanks so much for the great gym you guys have built.
Thank you
very
much. Thank you for being part of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, my great pleasure.
Done.